Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rajesh, and I'm your host for the Leadership Edge podcast. With me today is Pankaj Rai. Pankaj is a corporate banker turned strategy and operations leader turned data analytics leader. He has a rich and a long career with the likes of Dell, Wells Fargo, and he's currently the head of data and analytics as the chief data officer, Aditya Birla Group, an Indian multinational with presence in 42 countries, having more than $70 billion in revenue. In addition, Pankaj is an avid health expert and a fitness runner. He's run in over 50 plus marathons and he's given TED Talks on healthy living. Pankaj, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rajesh. Great to be here.
So, Pankaj, where does this podcast find you? Are you in Bangalore? You're traveling? Where are you today?
I'm sitting in my office in a conference room.
All right. So much for remote working today. All right. Pankaj, I just want to dive right in. There's a rich body of work that you've done across supply chain marketing. You come from a corporate finance background, and so one of the things we look for in leadership is how do you kind of channel and bring together a lot of this domain and other experience, right, and leadership skills to make change happen. And we live in times of profound change. Talk to us a little bit about your journey at Dell and Wells Fargo. These are very large, complex organizations, and how you kind of navigated the change to make your charter happen.
So, Rajesh, I've often been asked, you mentioned corporate banker, this, that, and the other, and people say, how did you plan your career and how did you move from one to the other and all of that? And then that made me reflect myself to see what is common in some of these career moves and, what has stayed constant. There is this famous small clip from Jeff Bezos where someone asked him that with such a changing world, how do you determine what to do? He said, I build businesses not on what is changing, but what will remain constant, which is customer obsession in its case. So I was looking for what is unchanged in my career and life and how do I define what I did? So I would say in hindsight, looks like I was doing things that I enjoyed doing and I was making a contribution to the business in some way. Now, in some cases, that contribution was through doing credit appraisals. In some other situations, it was about telling them about strategy. In some other situation, it was using data analytics, somewhere something else. So I would say that I think the two common things were enjoying the environment and the people that I was working with and making a contribution using some of the skills that I had picked up, or I was learning them and picking them up. So that's how I would describe it. Specifically in Wells Fargo and Dell, which were my previous two employers, Dell gave me an opportunity to delve into data analytics. This is a field I had never imagined I would ever be working on. And it just came my way when someone said that we want to set up a data team. And in fact, they wanted to start up in the financial services space, Dell Financial Services. And they said, oh, you have worked in banks before. Do you want to set up a DFS analytics team? They said, I haven't done that, but yeah, let me try doing that. And that led me into the whole world of data analytics for a long time. And it obviously wasn't limited to financial services. In fact, financial services became a very small portion of the larger piece. And similarly, in Wells Fargo, I was asked to say, we haven't been doing digital product management in India. Why don't you help set up a digital product management team for us? And I said, I don't know much about that, but why not? So I would say that I have taken up challenges that were thrown at me, imagining that I will bring some knowledge that I have and some new knowledge that I will gain. And that has been the constant endeavor, that you bring something to the table and you learn something more. Just regurgitating what you've done before doesn't excite me.
And would you say that, in this era, right, we're looking for generalists, we're looking for specialists. The pendulum swings often, right? We went from an era where, hey, it's perfectly fine if you're a generalist to, no, we really need deep specialists, especially with AI and us going more vertical focused, even with SaaS companies, right, which are going more vertical focused. There is this continuum. So from your perspective, did you just happen to gather a set of skills? I mean, you were in operations management, you were a Six Sigma consultant, you were a corporate banker. Did having these kind of diverse experiences help you prepare better for these kind of leadership roles, or just kind of happened, by chance? And, when you got the opportunity, you were able to kind of dig in and leverage those skills?
Yeah, so first of all the roles happened by chance. And secondly, when I was doing my MBA, and this was in Ahmedabad, I think we were told at that time, and I didn't pay too much attention to it, that this is an MBA school which was set up to create general managers. So apparently in those days, whenever it was set up, They didn't want to create functional managers, which I think maybe some others did. They wanted to create general managers because they felt that is what a gap in the Indian environment was. And therefore, they never encouraged specialization. No one would say, I'm an MBA in finance or HR or operation. They would kind of promote that. And somewhere in the college also, I never took a liking to any one subject. Some people had a liking that I want to be a banker or a marketing person or an ops person. I just liked or disliked all courses equally. So therefore, I didn't have an identity of a industry or a function. And frankly, that has been the case. Even now, people say, are you an analyst? I said, no, I'm someone who likes to do new things and likes to make a contribution to the business. And that can take the shape of a strategy or analytics or digital or any other thing. But the goal is trying something new, making a contribution. The method doesn't really matter. So that is what I think has been my own approach. Now, if you look at it holistically in any company, it's a team that delivers. It's no one person that delivers. My view will be that over a period of time, there'll always be a proportion of people who are generalists and a proportion of people who are specialists. That proportion might change, but I think the lesson for all of us is to say, what is it that we really enjoy doing? I think again, in hindsight, that I don't think I have been associating myself as a specialist in my mind, maybe a generalist, but I know several friends of mine who are specialists. They enjoy doing that. So I would say there's a need for both. And I would, in fact, in my own team, there are a bunch of specialists. Had they not been there, this team couldn't perform. So I do think that everyone has a role to play at different points in time, depending on supply and demand, the need can change. But I think over time, if we know what we are good at, it's good to know. Maybe we aren't able to do the role that we are good at all the time. But if we know that, we can always go after that North Star over a long period of time.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is it's more of assembling, kind of the right mix or proportion of generalists and specialists to kind of get the outcome that you're looking for. So again, your data and analytics career spans many different domains, right? There's supply chain, there's logistics, there's strategy, there's marketing. Tell us a little bit more about, how you defined a North Star, or how you had to kind of put together this team, create alignment, and then move that, right? Because back in those days, I think data analytics was still a relatively new thing. We didn't have anywhere near the sophistication of platforms, tools, frameworks that we have now, right? That a much smaller team can perhaps do. So how did you kind of approach it? How did you align yourself with your leadership and get to some of those outcomes?
So let me give you two analogies that I use to describe this. So one of the analogy that I use now, and then the other is the analogy that I used to use back then. So the analogy today I use is of cricket. I tell people that, look at cricket. Every individual will have probably a slightly different skill set. Some of them can be general managers. They are all-rounders. Some of them can be very focused specialists. They are wicket keepers. So I say that, determine what you are good at and what you will really, the role you'll play. But try to be a captain in one match at least. So even if you're a wicket keeper and if you're a captain, you are forced to think about the roles and responsibility for all the others and their interrelationship as well. So I do think that some amount of integration skills, if you may, is a good thing to capture. And you don't have to be that all the time. But if you have, let's say you're a wicket keeper or a right arm spinner or whatever, but you're a captain of a team for one or two matches, I do think that you will develop some new muscles, new appreciation of what does it take to create a winning team versus just doing your job. So that is the approach that I'm telling people these days. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be a captain all the time if that's what you think you are good at. But even if you're not, try to be a captain, which means lead a project, lead a program couple of times. Once you know the interrelationship, you'll probably do your specialist job also better next time when you are not a captain. So that is one analogy that I use now, because a lot of people ask me, well, how do you think I should develop my career? I'm a specialist journalist, this, that, and the other. So I said, try it all. Over time, you'll know which one you like being more. But once in a while, try the other so that you are also thinking about the integration, because it's the team that delivers. The team has to win the match. So you got to understand the role that you play in the team. That's one. I think the analogy that I used to use back then when I set up the Dell team, I had also worked in the consulting firm. And when I was creating that team, I was thinking, how should I create this team? So I told people that, think of us as consultants, management consulting people. And that was the analogy I had. I said, these teams have a junior analyst, an engagement manager, and a partner. So I said, frankly, we should just have 3 levels or 3 roles. All others are like, no answer within that. So if you're a junior person in those days, you are the analyst who are working, doing the, heavy lifting, all of that. The next level is the engagement manager, who's sort of engage in the entire relationship, understanding the business context. So let's say you're a supply chain person, you're talking to the head of supply chain in North America. You're trying to understand what does he do, who does he service, what are his peers doing, all of that kind of thing. And then if you're a partner, then you're probably managing a larger engagement of multiple supply chain people across all geographies, something like that, right? So I had created that analogy to say you should have a more technical view when you are younger and junior, slightly more broader view of collaboration and integration, and a slightly more strategic view when you are at the partner level. So that is the analogy that I used to say, that, doing, collaborating, and thinking, the three layers that you keep adding to yourself. So in fact, these days in my own team, we have this framework that we use. We call it the 3W framework: ways of thinking, ways of working, ways of doing. So we always, so again, it's somewhat related to that, although I didn't think of this analogy. I'm thinking of it only now that you asked me, that the ways of doing is the technical part, which you get hired for. Ways of working is all collaboration, funding, all the ways of working part. Ways of thinking is really all about strategy and, stuff like that. So here also we tell people that slowly you have to add from technical skills to other skills. In fact, I say that science, commerce, humanities. So first you come in because you're a scientist, you're an engineer, but you have to add commerce to understand the commercial aspect of it, and also the humanities, which is the strategy aspect of it. So the terminology I'm using now is a full stack human being. Don't think about full stack in the horizontal way. These are things getting automated. Think vertically, where to your scientific temper, you have to have the commercial and the strategic temper as well. And that's when you will succeed in today's day and age. So I think these are the various analogies of a consulting organization, of a cricket team, or a full stack human being. All of these at different points in time that I have used tend to point to the same thing, that you have to understand where you are, what you're good at, what are the other skills that you need to develop, and what are the other team member that you need to have in the team to deliver on the larger objective.
Yeah, I think the full stack human being certainly resonated with me. These days it's all about full stack this or that with AI, and kind of the layering of, you need to understand the business, right? You need to understand the fundamentals, and I think that's where the commerce piece comes in. And you need to understand relationships, you need to understand ways of collaborating, and I think that's where the humanities comes in. I think a lot of us are engineers or started off as engineers, so we tend to think that just tech itself can solve a lot of the problems, and I think you kind of laid it out differently. So one question I had is, for some of these domains, right? It can be supply chain or logistics, and we're approaching these problems, and let's say you don't have the domain expertise, right? You don't come from a supply chain background. In your career, how do you build trust and relationship? Because the domain experts ultimately have to give you access to the data, and and the data becomes the foundation on which you build your analytics, you build your insights. So how do you convince them to partake with that data and knowledge when they look at you? Frankly, it's sometimes as an outsider who doesn't have the level of perhaps the domain knowledge or experience that they have.
So in my first job, which was a Dell job where I got into analytics and I used the consulting firm partner analogy, I think we also went forward to hire people from consulting backgrounds. So there were people who had worked in I2 technologies in the US, and therefore leading the supply chain analytics practice for us. Now, if you have worked in I2 with so many leading companies and you are sitting in Dell analytics team and talking to stakeholders in North America and telling them that, when you were consulting with FedEx, what they did, or what UPS did, or what someone else did, suddenly there's a very strong affiliation that, oh, this guy knows me and knows my business and knows my peers. So I think we actually went out and hired people with global consulting background. And frankly, if you really reflect, all consulting people have a reasonably good data background as well. They may not be data science background, but they've all been using data, because consulting is all about finding patterns and large amount of data or large amount of, things that you do. So I think all of those guys were then having these, data science and data engineering people under them, who then they will guide them on what problems to solve. Because I think what we are now all anyway seeing, that what is worth solving is more important than how you solved it. Because these days, figuring out what is worth solving is becoming a bigger deal than that. And that is where I think the consulting comes in, that they're able to frame the right problems and then the others can go solve it. So I think that's how we build trust, to say, we understand your business, we are consultants, doesn't matter whether we use data science or calculator to solve it for you. And that's how we build trust. And frankly, that has been the core theme always, that start with the business. Even now, when we talk about this 3W and all, the top W is the business strategy. So our initial discussion is with the business people to say, why don't you first just articulate your strategy? And then from that strategy, we determine what are the areas where data science can help you. And then discuss with them and figure out a few areas to say, we'll work on these three problems, because this is where data science can create differentiated capabilities for you in alignment to your strategy. So I think it's all about customer, it's all about business, it's all about strategy. And then data and analytics or anything else is a tool to enable that to happen.
Got it. And these kind of cross-functional teams are quite diverse, right? You have consultants in your team, you have data scientists in your team, you probably have business analysts and engineers and a whole bunch of others, right? So it's heterogeneous. It's not just product or engineering. How do you then plan for career advancement, right? And how do you plan for career progression for those individuals? It could be people managers, it could be ICs. How have you kind of seen that play out in your past roles? Because these teams are kind of unique, right? Because they're the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, and that's why they function. So how do you manage career conversations?
Yeah, so I think the career conversations these days have become quite different from what they were maybe 10, 15 years ago when I would say we started off. Because I would say that at least those days, at least we all had a belief that there is a certain hierarchy and there is a certain path. Nowadays, at least I don't believe, and I tell people that there is no career path. In fact, that question itself is flawed. And the reason I say that is I tell people that, the way I look at the business environment, I look at Amazon as a company. And in fact, I generally say that Amazon is the Gita of the corporate world. And by Gita, I mean that it has all the answers, just like the Bhagavad Gita is the answer for professional, personal question. This has answers for professional questions. And the reason I chose Amazon and not everyone else is that I think that is the only company which seems to have revenue streams coming out of very different industries. Look at Google or Meta. End of the day, they are advertising companies. All others, they are in one business. But Amazon is the only one which defies an industry boundary. It's very hard to say what business are they in or what they will be in. And I think, therefore, the way I define or look at how Amazon thinks or does is to say, it's almost like the Gita, that you focus on what is best for the customer and then the products will follow. So therefore, if you look at the Amazon story, they don't have a very defined future on where they will land. And if the company doesn't have a defined future on where they will land, it's very hard for an employee to say, I have a very defined career path. So the way I describe career paths to people is that think about your career also as an agile product, which is how most digital companies are designed now.
Hey, Pankaj. So I had one question with regards to career progression, right? So if you let these very diverse heterogeneous teams comprised of consultants, business analysts, data scientists, and the like, and there's no straightforward progression, in the sense that if you had an engineering or a product organization, it's fairly linear in terms of how you grow. How have you had career advancement conversations in the past? How have you planned for career advancement for your team members in the past? And how do you contrast that with what we are seeing today in the industry and how you're having those conversations today? Any insights you can share?
Yeah, Rajesh. And Rajesh, if you think about it, and all of us, both of you and I have been working for the last several decades, if you reflect on the way the work has been designed in companies, it's all designed for the manufacturing era. But I think the corporations came into being 100 years ago when manufacturing was the predominant industry. It wasn't agriculture, it wasn't services. So if you look at all the management context, the hierarchy, everything was of manufacturing. And manufacturing is all designed for precision, accuracy, stability. Now, if you look at it, we are already in the cognitive era, which is actually the inverse of that. It doesn't need precision and accuracy. It needs experimentation, volatility, all of that, right? So the world has changed quite rapidly from, and the systems that were created were for the previous era. So back then, I would say the career paths were very definitive. The waterfall model actually explained this. If you think of the past as a waterfall where it was all predictable, you can plan it, you have a project plan. So career could also be planned. You go this way, that way, all of that, because you knew the product will go this way and your career will go this way. Now, if you look at the product is agile. You only know the next 2 sprints. You have no idea what will happen 5 years from now. And you're very happy with that. Amazon can't predict their website structure 2 years from now. They don't care. They don't want to. They say, we will just be agile. We'll listen to customers. We'll keep adding value to it and it'll become what the customer needs. So I tell folks that today you have to be agile from your career perspective also, in line with how the environment that you are in. So your 5 year later career question is an irrelevant question, just like what will Amazon's website look like 5 years from now is an irrelevant question. More important question is, are you at a periodic basis adding value or adding features to yourself if you are a product, and keep iterating so that you become relevant and important and all of that continuously. And therefore, where you land up 5 years from now should not be predicted. cannot be predicted, need not be predicted. You should just keep. No, this is a very different way of thinking about it, because all the people have been used to it. It's the same thing that if you tell the waterfall people to adopt agile, it's very difficult. It's such so much in the muscle memory. Same way, if you tell this to older people, it's very hard because it's in the muscle memory. But I think the younger folks, and we have hired a lot of youngsters, they are able to relate and adapt to it far more. So I do think that we are in a period of transition. Next 20, 30 years, the whole world will become agile. Even the government policy making has become agile. Pretty much everything in the world has become agile, even if they don't call it that. And therefore, the careers have to be agile. It's just that people are so stuck, organizational processes so stuck in the waterfall era, that they still talk about career path, and the entire taxonomy has become irrelevant. But since no new taxonomy has been created, the same question is being asked. And that is the same thing in building businesses also. People are asking old-fashioned questions, and those answers are not relevant anymore. And we have to find new questions. But till new questions are found or more established, the old questions are still being asked, which I think are not necessarily relevant. But it'll take time. It'll change, I think.
In this kind of the cognitive era you talked about, then how do organizations promote and retain their top talent, right? How do they give them more opportunities? How do they kind of retain that talent? Because the traditional way has been, frankly, better compensation, better rewards, bigger titles, more mandate, right? More responsibilities. That's been the traditional kind of way of doing things. So in this era, how do, and this applies to medium to large organizations, how will they, um, go about managing this?
Funny that this morning I was having a similar conversation with a senior HR colleague in our group. And I was telling her that, the organizations, at least the HR community, has said that we will help manage your career. And it's tough because of what all I said, because, you can't satisfy all. So I was telling her, how about organizations reframing their goal in the employee life to say, we will help you actually manage your entire life. We will probably allow you to also help with your financial planning, your health and well-being and all of that. So even today, organizations actually do that. They will have some focus on health and well-being and bunch of programs happening there. They also have programs related to financial well-being. There are many other counseling and all of that, but they are all sitting under different heads somewhere else. I was telling, it's almost like Clayton Christensen's article of How Will You Design Your Life, that why not think about the entire life planning as a broader goal and thought process, so that employees are looking at their own self in a balanced scorecard way. So even in this year, let's say for whatever reason, I had some expectation of a promotion or an increment, didn't happen, but I ran a marathon or I did something cool through the CSR initiative or some other thing. So in that balanced scorecard, I've still gained something and feel that, okay, I'm making progress, and career or that promotion or increment is not the only thing that I'm thinking about. So I think that there is an opportunity for organizations to take a broader approach to employee well-being, and saying the well-being includes financial, fitness, career, learning, so many other things. And let's look at all of it. And surely this year when you went and attended that course, you really enjoyed it, you learned a lot. That's a good check mark. You did that. So I do think that if we create a portfolio life, it'd be a better way to do it. I don't see anyone doing it right now, but I don't see any reason why it can't be done. And I'm hoping that this conversation with my HR colleague, maybe we can start doing it somewhere. I, in my own way, try to do it in my own team informally, because these systems are not formal. So, but I do think anyone, can start to think in those lines. It may not be in the organizational system, but if you start thinking that way and helping people, I do think people will feel good about it.
Yeah, no, I definitely like the portfolio analogy, right? We think of investments as portfolio, stocks, mutual funds, debt funds, money markets, so on and so forth. You don't just say it's just equities, right? You can have a well-rounded portfolio, and maybe having an employee portfolio or helping employees create a portfolio view of their career is probably the way to go, is what I'm hearing. One thing adjacent to that I want to ask, Pankaj, is organizations in the past, at least, have spent a lot of time nurturing and growing their leadership, right? Especially those who are in the middle management, who could be the next generation of leaders for that organization, right? And then they're closely nurtured and mentored by the senior leadership, like folks like yourself. And now with, in the era of AI, with all the tech layoffs that are happening, right, and organizational restructuring that's going on, I would say that layer is increasingly vulnerable. So how do you then, navigate that, right? What are the options for folks who are sitting at that layer, who on one hand working hard, trying to get to that next level of leadership, but on the other hand, really kind of face the axe as the restructuring triggered by various things, including AI, is happening.
I think the psychological contract between the organization and the employee, again, born in the manufacturing era, which had a long sort of horizon, was built on loyalty and trust and longevity. And I think it was right. So if you were working in Ford Motor Company, I think it made sense for both of you to stay on for 20 years because there's so much happening. It takes a while to learn. It's not easy. And I think it worked both. And in Japanese people, they were the quality gurus, TPM and so on and so forth. They had a lifelong sort of employment culture and many other, right? So I think maybe in the manufacturing era, it may have been the right thing to do, that you are all committed to the same cause and you stay along for a long time, all of that. I think today in this cognitive era, there's merit in going out and learning something and doing more for yourself also and for organization also. And I think it is also reflected in, even if you look at large traditional organizations which have been around globally, they're unable to groom all the leaders for all their needs because their aspirations to do things require them to bring new capabilities from the outside. And some of those capabilities can't be built within. So I think I would say that the organization have to change and the employees have to change the psychological contract in the cognitive era to say that you can't do it all in-house. You have to allow, some kind of openness to saying, I'm helping you grow, but that doesn't mean I have to hold you within my team as well or in my company. It's okay if you went along and learned something new. And maybe at some point in time, if you came back, that's fine as well. So I think that whole older loyalty to the firm construct has to be replaced with the loyalty to the purpose construct. So I do think that those changes have to also happen because I think both employees and organizations' aspirations cannot be so tightly aligned for a long time to come. And we have to allow some amount of openness in both parties going away. So the firms are, showing up by firing people at many points in time. Employees have been showing up in attriting. Both of them have felt these two things to be bad things because it goes against the grain of the psychological contract. I think we have to just normalize it to say that is how it ought to be. That hasn't happened. I think we have to change the default hypothesis.
So if I'm a mid-career professional, right, trying to build my portfolio, there's obviously organizations that you're working for, and to your point, you're trying to align to purpose rather than trying to sign up for loyalty. And I'm building a set of skills. Do you think we're going to move to a model where side gigs or right gig work kind of projects become much more normalized, and it's okay for people to do these things on the side while they pursue their full-time employment, right? Because of all the volatility, uncertainty. Would you encourage your team members to kind of go do that? How is this going to play out, right? Because both sides feel there's no more, to your point, right? Loyalty has kind of gone out the window. So how do you address that?
Yeah, so there are 2, 3 different ways. Let me try and answer this question. So I have a sort of a EP Maslow's hierarchy type of a framework to say process, product, and purpose. I think we were all process owners at one point of time. Over time, when the products came into being, we became product owners. Time has come for us to become purpose owners. So I was, owner of this assembly line. I was owner of SAP product. Now I should be owner of some purpose rather than this. And these are all important. But so therefore, in my mind, the loyalty has shifted from being a process owner person to a product to a purpose owner. So I do think that the loyalty is there, but the loyalty has to be to a larger cause and not to an organization or a person because they represent the lower order needs of process and product. They don't mostly represent purpose. So while all organizations have a purpose, it's hardly possible that organization and employee both will have a similar alignment, and therefore loyalty ought to be there, but to the purpose of the individual, the purpose of the company, and sometimes they may not intersect, and that's fine. So I think loyalty shouldn't go away, but loyalty should be aligned to a higher cause versus a lower cause is what I'm trying to say. The second point is we had interns join us last month and they were talking about careers and all of that. And I told them that, you all have to think about doing something outside of your work as well. You can't just say that this is a job that my manager has given, I'm doing a good job and that's it. You have to do experiments. So they said, so would you like us to do moon? I said, yes and no. No, in the sense that you should not be cheating your organization, which is what the flavor of moonlighting is, that, oh, you're not working hard and doing it. I think your goal should be, I will be an outperformer in the office. Whatever is the job, I'll make the maximum out of it. But I know that that may not be enough. The organization
Right.
can change, the technology can change, my needs can change. So I need to keep making investment in something else. What that something else is, I can't tell you, but you have to do something like that. You can't just do what has been told to you. So that is what I believe, that everyone has to determine their own new portfolio life. And the new portfolio can only happen when you experiment with trying different asset classes, if I can use your financial service analogy. So it's almost like sports, that you were born and playing gully cricket, but then you tried badminton or squash or whatever. You couldn't play ice hockey, that's fine. But whatever was in your control, you tried a bunch of things, and over time, things change. Oh, enjoy playing badminton. I used to play squash earlier, but I tried, and then tomorrow I may start enjoying pickleball. I don't know. I've tried a few times. So I think we have to invest our time in trying new things, because anything that is here today may or may not last longer. Our interest may change, our capabilities might change, and we have to continue to be ahead of the curve in trying that. And the last way to describe this could be to use the analogy that I use these days of the optimization equation, that we are all born as a variable in someone else's optimization equation in our family or spouse or organization. Eventually, we have to form our own goal function or a purpose function or our own equation, and then everyone else has to become a variable there. And when I say everyone else has to become a variable there, I don't mean that they are any less. It's just that we have become more aware of ourselves, and that Atma Gyan has given rise to our own optimization equation, which tells us what we are going after and therefore what is the role others have to play. Unfortunately, we become so caught up in being a variable in others' equation that we are just playing some role that someone else wants us to play, which we should, because we are a social animal. But it should not be at the expense of not having our own equation. So I do think that if we reflect and think about it deeply, we'll be able to find it. We'll be able to communicate to others also, in which case they understand why we are doing what we are doing. And sometimes we may not be following what they want us to do because we have a higher order need of our own, and people will respect that. So I do think that it's our duty to understand ourselves better and be able to articulate and communicate, and that will make us less stress-free life than I think a lot of people are going through today.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I want to go back to the intern discussion. I think that's fascinating. So I think what I'm hearing you say is, don't moonlight at the expense of your organization. That's obviously paying you, right, your salary, but do something, right? You have to do projects, perhaps contribute to other causes, right? Mentor, coach, do whatever is needed. As long as it's not at the expense of the organization, go do that is what I'm hearing. And I think that's a very healthy way to do it. The other thing is very popular these days is passive income streams, right? And I think it goes back to your equation analogy. And if I'm building an equation and there are multiple variables, my full-time job is one variable, and then I want to have other sources of income, right? It could be advisory, it could be products, it could be teaching, whatever it is, right? Is that okay, right? Everybody has to build that kind of an equation, and then that gives them the awareness that, okay, I'm more than just this job, or right, this role that I'm performing. Do all of us need to have our own equation, or if we don't have it, we have to create one quickly? Is that where we're headed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if everything can be personalized, your clothes and your medicine, why should your life not be personalized? Everyone is trying to find a career path. Career path by itself means that someone has trodden that path. Why should that be so? Everyone can have their own path if they can have their own clothes and medicine and everything else. So I do think that today actually we are in such a nice place where everyone can find their own path. It's just that since we have been herded along for a long time, we don't know how to craft our own path. And we have to help people go beyond the herd, try new things and find their own path. I think that is the biggest challenge for the society, that we have made people slightly blinkered and say, you have this cohort, you have that, and therefore you should do this, and there is a pattern and you should be matching to that pattern. I think breaking away from the herd is always hard, and you will make mistakes and you will sometimes fall. But normalizing failure and learning from them is what we do in the office. Why wouldn't we do it for our life? Of course, we have to make sure that we don't create fatal failures. But, controlled experimentation in life is the way that I am suggesting that we think about. So in many ways, I'm saying what you are being asked to do in office, which is to be agile, product, fast failure, same applies to life. Life is no different. And similarly to your point about the office work, I'm not so much about loyalty to office. I'm saying office is an 8-10 hours time that you spend. Why won't you try to maximize it? Forget loyalty or whatever. Why wouldn't I want to do the best I can? And if I am doing the best I can, I should be an outperformer in that field. So if I'm playing a game for 8 to 10 hours, I should aspire to do the best I can, be the best of what I can. And then after that, as I go home, I try to do something else to invest in new skills. So that's how I'm looking at it. So I'm not trying to make it moralistic. I'm just trying to make it very practical to say, forget all the morals. You are a human being. You are given an 8 to 10 hour office with a certain job. Try to maximize it. Try to become the best, learn the best, whatever. Don't like the job, change the job, whatever. But don't look at job as a core and outside of it as the real thing. That doesn't make sense to me.
So it's more of work-life integration than work-life balance, right? And that's the term that's
Yeah,
popular
yeah,
these days.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
by
yeah,
by really kind of giving it your best, in a way, you're not segregating it from your rest of life. Rather, it becomes integral to your life, right? As opposed
yeah,
to,
yeah,
oh gosh,
yeah,
I have to
yeah,
go work
yeah.
these 8 or 10 hours. I
Yes,
don't know how to
yes.
do it. I just have to put in the hours, right? Punch the clock, whatever you want to call it, so that I get paid. So I think that makes sense. That mindset, I think, is very important. Let's talk a little bit about the role of mentors, right? So I think many of us just happen to organically collect mentors as we go on in our journey. And I think I've been lucky enough to get mentors from different fields, from different disciplines. How do you craft that, right? Should you be more thoughtful of assembling your board, so to speak, your own personal board of directors, and getting a set of mentors? Because again, we live in such uncertain, volatile times. So again, for people who are early or even mid-career, how should they approach setting up that personal board of directors? And does that analogy still make sense?
Yeah. So I think, think about religion and spirituality. Sometimes people have one God. Some people have different personal gods. Some people are atheist. So end of the day, the role of religion or spirituality is to make you a happy or a better human being. To me, the mentor is probably no different from that. You can have no mentor. You can have many mentors. You can have one mentor. I don't know what is the right thing. It's just like on the God side. You can be an atheist and be happy, and you can have multiple gods or one God and still be happy. So I do think that you should look around and see what works for you. Just in your maybe in your spiritual life, you may have figured something out. Maybe in your professional life, it's the same thing. So to me, they are not distinguishable. It's the same thing. If you ask me, I don't have a mentor. I have met multiple people and I have found something good in them and I have embraced them. I have stayed in touch with them and consulted them, and it goes on. So to me, more mentors or more people who can teach me something can and will come at some point in time. And I should not say, oh, this is my board and that's it. So I'm constantly enhancing my, locus of impact or control and trying to add more people, and more new people can add new value to me. So that's how I look at it, that I don't believe in a static set of mentors, because those mentors were relevant in the past. But what are the mentors who can be relevant for the future? To me, these days, a lot of younger people that I engage with for various reasons, they are teaching me a lot of things. Now, should I call them a mentor? Maybe, maybe not, whatever. So I do think that we can learn from anyone and everyone. I mean, we learn from a stone god who doesn't even talk. People go and pray and says, hey, I got such peace. So when you have a real human being in front of you and willing to talk to them and engage with them, I'm sure you can learn a lot for anyone that you care to talk to.
Yeah. No, I think it makes sense. It's up to each individual how they want to go about it, but I think it's a choice that one has to make. The thing is, is kind of hanging over all of us, and we just completed 3 years of Chat GPT. The world has never been the same with generative AI. And there's a lot more coming, I'm sure. The question is, Pankaj, when you look back at your experience in your career, how do you prepare for something like this, right? What are the 2 or 3 things that people can take away and say, yes, it's a lot of change and it's going to just keep changing. But here are the few things that are constant that I can reliably bank on as an individual, as a professional, that I can say is my strength and carry that forward into this age of AI. What would that be according to you if you had to reach back and look at your own career, or what would that be?
So there was this conversation I had with a guy sitting next to me in the flight yesterday when I was coming from Delhi. He was just sitting next to me. I'm a curious guy. I generally ask, what do you do? And I realized he works for Google, a young chap. And we went about chatting about life and career. And he was saying, what happened in your days and what happened in your days, this, that, the other. So finally, I think one of the conclusions was that this generation, and he was like 25, 26, whatever, just a few years experience. I said, in the next 20, 30 years of your life, I mean, they obviously get far more salary than any of us ever did. So or at least that was my sort of interpretation of the discussion, was that, don't think of your identity as your career or role. Many of us did that because in those days, that is the only thing we had. And I think these days, many of us my friends who are retiring, they don't know anything else. Their identity is their job or their role or their industry, and nothing beyond that. And that can be okay if you're Warren Buffett, but if you're in a salaried job and the job suddenly ends and you don't know what to do with those skills, then that becomes a problem. So do have a identity beyond the job as well was one theme. He himself said that, yeah, we are earning so much and I don't know how to think about it. And I was telling him that don't spend all the money because you don't know whether this income stream will last forever. For us, we generally felt that our salaries will continue to go up and we could take loans which will pay over a 20-year period. I was telling him that, you don't know how long your job will last. So let your income stream not determine your lifestyle. Let it be there. Let your lifestyle be what it is. Save for a rainy day. Maybe you can take a couple of years off and do something with that and not take a big loan. So essentially saying that don't make your job your identity because the job will keep changing. You may want flexibility, so don't spend all the money that you have. Keep something in the buffer and be ready for layoff at any point in time and not be, unhappy that, oh, what happened? I didn't plan for it. So I do think that the life now will be far more, different from the past. And therefore the approach has to be that agile approach that don't have a big view of the future in the waterfallian era. Think of it as a products fail, products have to reinvent themselves and things like that. So I do think that we have to look at our portfolio life in the form of how we look at product management, that no product lives forever. Some can get reinvented, some can get obsolete, new ones have to be found. And so as we have to look at ourselves also as someone that we may become obsolete in this avatar. Are we willing to take up a new avatar? And one of my role models has been Kapil Dev, who reinvented himself from cricket to golf. And I tell people, you'll probably have to do 5 times those types of things in the era that you are in, and you'll have multiple careers. And let not that first career be your identity. So I don't know, Rajesh, whether I answered your question properly, but this is the conversation I had yesterday with him. And he was also thinking, and I was telling him, you're not even married yet. So once you get married, one more variable comes into your equation, and that might change things, and you have to factor that in. So they obviously have a far more complex life with many more variables and far more volatility. But then what is constant is that don't get overburdened by all these frills. Just be figure out that who you are and don't get this thing hassled by all the competition around you.
I think the purpose becomes even more important, and figuring out what you're optimizing for in that equation becomes even more important, right? I think in the past, to your point, there's sort of a linear relationship between performance and rewards, and as long as you kept performing or outperforming, your rewards would go up and up. That's not the case anymore. So now it's a non-linear equation, or some kind of a factorial. I don't know what kind of an equation it is anymore, but
But
point
one
is,
one one other
yeah, you
thing,
have to.
Rajesh, I'll add is which also came through yesterday. So this boy was from Delhi, and I was also in Delhi for 25 years and now 20 years, and we were also comparing between Delhi and Bangalore and so forth. And most people will agree that the Delhi culture is a lot more about show off and many things which are external in nature. And Bangalore, there is a very different type of culture, and you can do many other things and so on and so forth. So I do think that the famous adage that you are a sum total of the 5 people that you are most close to. So I do think that we have a choice to hang around with people that we think will empower and enrich us. And many times we don't pay too much attention to that. Our parents used to pay a lot of attention to who we hang out with, who our friends are, and all of that. So I do think that we have to also choose our cities, our friends, our organizations, our play groups wisely, because they will determine who we are. And if we let it to be chance, then we are losing an opportunity to develop ourselves in a way that will help us.
Yeah, controllables versus uncontrollables, right? You can control what you read, who you choose to spend time with. That makes a lot of sense. And we've seen, right? We've seen the Amazon mafia, the PayPal mafia, and these were all founders who hung out together for a long, long time and went on to build generations of successful companies. I think that makes a lot of sense. So, last question, Pankaj, what's the best career advice, or tip that you received, or present, and something that you can share with the audience?
No, I think in many ways people have said it differently to me at different points in time when I was at a crossroad. And I think it's some of these career advices are very simple when you look at it and not as profound as they are made out to be. They've all said that, listen to everyone, think about it, and in the end, do what dil chata hai, somewhat. So I think in our own data science and decision making, we always say that, this is the art and science of decision making. You can get all the data, but eventually it's your own judgment, your own style, what works for you, that intuition has to be added to that decision. So I do think that career also is a decision making process. You are taking many decisions at the point in time, so they are no different from any other decision making process, that where they say that you listen to everyone but you do what you truly believe in. And that is an intuitive thing which you may not be able to explain to anyone, but as long as you can stay with it, I think that's what it is. And I think that's what I tell everyone, that you can listen to all the advice, and but eventually you have to follow your path. It may not be the best path, it may be ridden with problems, but then you learn from them and then you move on. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah, I think this era, we're fortunate, but also the amount of information coming in can be overwhelming, right? Podcasts, social media tweets from your favorite mentors or leaders, right? Success stories of startups. So it can be very enthralling, but you have to kind of look at all of that and then look at where you are and see if how, that makes sense to you. So I think it becomes even more important to listen to yourself and see you want to go. Because this has been a fascinating conversation, so many insights, so much to unpack. Thank you so much for your time. And where do folks reach out to you? Where do we find you?
I'm there on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. I think actually I talk to a lot of people. So in fact, anyone reaches out to me, I tell them this is my WhatsApp number. Just message me. And usually when I'm traveling from into office or on travel, I have a lot of dead time in between, and I talk to a lot of people. So I'm quite open to talking to people, and there's enough and more time. So my phone number is known to most of them, and including you.
I'm going to stick with LinkedIn. Please reach out to Pankaj on LinkedIn and connect with him. He's a great giver and a leader and a mentor, and I'm sure it'll be an enriching conversation. So thanks again, Pankaj, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajesh. Thanks.